In the single bark formation, double A under center. The noob flanked out to the right. Arya the tailback. D is in a fur 3 defense. Ball is snapped. It's a flea flicker. Touchdown Bears! The 2-pup conversion to come.
And welcome back to 2-pup conversion. The only NFL and Bears podcast where one of us is going to be a country dog this week and they get to run around off leash.
Yeah, got a brand new leash. 100 feet. Didn't realize how long 100 feet is until I got this leash, and I'm like, oh wow, that's a lot, but she's gonna have a blast.
I kind of wish you'd give me a 100-foot leash.
Nah, you need to be kept on a short leash and preferably a muzzle too.
I mean, you're not totally wrong. Alright, so last week in our last episode, we did the top 10 picks live with two of our guests, and we thought this week it would be kind of fun to go back and look at what the experts thought were the best picks in the 2025 NFL Draft.
Yeah, so you said that you had a report by Matt Miller, right? So what were his rankings?
Yeah, absolutely. So Matt Miller, ESPN football expert, has the top 100. Now, if we went over the top 100, I think this podcast would last until next week, so I don't think we're going to be doing that today.
Nah, I'm good.
However, I think if we manage our time correctly, we should be able to get through like the top 10.
Okay, let's go.
All right, number one. Chicago Bears selected Luther Burden III, wide receiver.
That was number one, really?
That was number one. This wide receiving class was not as strong as like last year. Last year you had Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr. for that matter. But then this year it was number one wide receiver, if you classify him as that, was Colorado wide receiver / corner Travis Hunter. Once you got past him, second best, you could say it was Ted McMillan, but there was still some argument over some of the other remaining players like Golden, who ended up going to the Packers, blah, or even Luther Burden III. So it's one of those where what the Bears were able to get is somebody in which was one of the top receiving prospects, but they got him in the second round.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting, too, because I remember last week, you guys were all very blindsided by the decisions that were made by the Bears on what their draft selections were. And like this morning, I overheard you listening to a different podcaster, and they were talking about how the Bears just made awful drafts based on the people that were left on the board and blah, blah, blah. So it's just interesting that literally right out the gate, Matt Miller's number one was the Bears pick.
Yeah, I think we're going to get into this later on a little bit in the podcast as far as the Bears picks and exactly what they did right. So I think that we're going to definitely get into Luther Burden a little bit more in our third segment. I was trying to calculate in my brain what I had planned out today. Quickly going over Miller's opinion on why this was the number one. According to Matt Miller, Burden was his top wide receiver in the class, and he landed in a great situation with the Bears and new coach Ben Johnson. Burden's yard after catch ability is terrific, and Johnson's scheme has been elite at creating space for wide receivers. Burden starts as a slot receiver with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze flanking him, but he thrived in that alignment within Missouri when he was in college.
Okay.
So basically, Matt Miller's looking at it and saying that this is a really good situation with a really talented wide receiver.
Okay, cool.
I like it.
What's next? All
right, so number two, Arizona Cardinals draft Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan. I have to try to test myself. He didn't necessarily put the school, so I'm like trying to test myself and remember here.
I mean, that's better than I'm going to do with that test, so.
Right. So Matt Miller's overall ranking before the draft was he felt like Will Johnson was the seventh best player.
Okay.
And then he ended up getting drafted in the second round, 47th overall. So that's definitely a value pick there.
Mm-hmm.
So his thought there was Johnson was a top 10 player in this class when looking solely at film, but not accounting for injuries. I didn't want him to slip to round two. Jonathan Gannon, coach of the Arizona Cardinals, system is great for him. Johnson has Trevon Diggs-esque ball-hawking skills and is shut down corner when healthy. This is one of the steals of the draft as far as for value, as he was taken 40 spots lower than I had him ranked.
Wow. Okay.
Absolutely. All right, down to number 3. Raiders select running back. You got it? You got it?
Oh, no chance.
Ashton Jeanty.
Okay.
So Ashton Jeanty, that was the big running back out of Boise State.
Uh-huh.
I'm a little bit surprised, if I'm going to be totally honest here, just because of the fact that Ashton Jeanty was ranked so high on everybody's board, and then he's picked at 6. I mean, so like to have him as the number 3 best pick as far as when you're looking at value and where he was taken, I don't know. Matt Miller's ranking had him number 3 overall, and he got picked at 6. I just don't feel like that's necessarily an, oh my god, I can't believe he did that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the other guy dropped 40 spots, so I feel like to drop 3 is really not that crazy.
Right. Right up here is not only did Jeanty represent obvious value, but he fills a need for the team. The Raiders' new brass, Coach Pete Carroll and offensive coordinator Chip Kelly want a power running game, and Jeanty was the clear top back in the class. He'll be heavily featured as a runner and receiver while bringing the culture Carroll wants to establish in Las Vegas. So I think this also comes down to the scheme fit as well.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think it's just kind of surprising based on where he went and where he was ranked.
Yeah.
So number 4, I think that unfortunately this team, unfortunately, however you're feeling, is the Eagles. The Eagles always, for some reason, every year are able to somehow find a defensive player that falls into the bottom where they're picking, and they end up picking a really good player.
Yeah.
In this case, it is Jahad Campbell, the linebacker. Right up here is I like Campbell's fit in Philadelphia as much as I dig the 16 spot value. The Eagles got him by selecting him in this spot. We just saw Zach Bond have an all-pro season as a triple threat linebacker in Philly. Campbell is in the same mold, but he's arguably faster and stronger with high pass rush potential. He'll need some time to recover from surgery to repair a torn labrum, but no other team develops front 7 defenders like the Fly Eagles Fly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this one makes sense to me. I mean, shout out Mina Kimes. This was Mina Kimes' favorite player in the entire draft. And for him to drop all the way down to 31 and get scooped by the Eagles, I do agree. I think this was a good pick.
Yeah.
Number 5, Jalen Walker, edge, and he was drafted to the Atlanta Falcons 15th overall. Matt Miller had him ranked as the 5th best player on his board, and Jalen Walker, they were talking about him being a top 10 pick. He slid, and the slide stopped at 15 with Atlanta. Atlanta really desperately needed some better defense and get upgrades on that side of the ball. And that's what they really got from Jalen Walker. So I think having him as the 5th best, I think makes sense.
Yeah. You know, this may be a question that's better suited for a different segment later on, but why did so many of the players slide as much as they did? It seemed like after like picks number 1, 2, maybe even 3, then they were just completely blindsided by every pick that was made.
I think the weird thing is that there's a certain spot in the draft, like you were saying, where things went from we 100% expected this, and it kind of was following the mock drafts we were seeing, to everybody's just doing their own thing.
Yeah.
I think when you were going through it, Cam Ward going 1 made perfect sense. Travis Hunter going 2 made perfect sense. It was just surprising that the Jags came up from 5 and ended up picking them, but that made sense. Carter at 3 makes perfect sense. Will Campbell going at 4 to the Patriots, that was need-based. Again, that made perfect sense. I think that those top 4 picks, I think, were basically written in pen going into this.
Yeah.
You know, the whole thing of like, it's written in pencil, you can erase it, in pen you can't. But I think that what ended up happening is teams were getting on the board and they are getting on the clock, and then they were more picking for what they felt like was the higher upside and maybe not necessarily what was needed at that exact moment.
Okay.
So a team like, let's say the Saints, right before the Bears, had picked Calvin Banks Jr. out of Texas, and I think a lot of that was we really want to get a guy with high upside, and Calvin Banks was one of the better tackles in this draft, and there was a lot of questions on what the Saints were going to do, and there's a lot of wild cards going into this draft, and the Saints were definitely one of them. They were talking about the Saints taking a quarterback. They were talking about the Saints possibly going wide receiver, and I think once picks started to go sideways and people were going in different directions, like, for example, Carolina going after Ted McMillan was not something that was really expected. So because of that, I think then it threw off the rest of the draft, and then people started sliding.
Okay, so do you think it was something where, like, once somebody went off script of picking somebody random, then the other teams kind of started panicking, thinking that they weren't necessarily as confident that people would drop to where their position was and that they might need to kind of overshoot for them?
Very possible.
Okay.
Very, very, very possible.
Sorry, back to your list.
No, you're good. Now, number 6. Mentioned it a couple minutes ago. Travis Hunter, wide receiver corner, going to Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
So that was ranked as number 6. According to Matt Miller, Hunter was either number 1 or number 2 player on most boards. He loved that the Jaguars' first-year general manager, James Gladstone, made an aggressive trade to move up to get him. He slides in perfectly as an offensive playmaker for quarterback Trevor Lawrence alongside second-year receiver Brian Thomas Jr. And on top of that, he's also going to be able to help Jacksonville on defense. So it's kind of looked at as that value pick simply because he can play both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
And number 7, the one that excites me. Number 7, Colson Loveland, tight end out of Michigan to our Chicago Bears.
Yeah. You're just a little bit obsessed.
I mean, okay, let's be honest here. Is somebody who is quote-unquote obsessed making fan art for him to sign in 2 weeks?
Yes.
Oh.
But also, I think you should put your fan art up on the website so you can, like, shamelessly self-plug.
You're not wrong. That'd probably be a good idea. I spent a lot of time photoshopping Colson Loveland into a Bears uniform. That took a lot longer than I care to admit. So right up by Matt Miller here, I had Loveland as my number 1 tight end, and apparently the Bears agreed. They made him the top tight end drafted. His abilities in the passing game, he runs routes like a receiver and has the speed to separate from linebackers and safeties, makes Loveland an easy comparison to Sam Laporta, whom Bears coach Ben Johnson had great success with in Detroit. Value, need, and scheme fit all match with this pick. So I think that this is really... There's a lot of questions, and again, I know we're going to get into this a little bit later, but there's a lot of questions as far as Colston Loveland going over Tyler Warren as tight end 1. So much of it has to do with the Ben Johnson scheme fit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll be the first to say, if you listened to our podcast last week, my reaction was, oh my God, what have you done? Mm-hmm. And then the more I've read with the experts, and I've heard Ben Johnson talk about Colston Loveland, and I've heard Ryan Poles talk about him, it really did seem like a really great pick simply because it's going to give you a lot more options for Caleb to be able to pass to. And speaking of the two that we've been able to discuss, Luther Burden and Colston Loveland, you now have 4 legitimate threats down the field in those two plus DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. And what else is super exciting is just how young they are. Caleb Williams drafted last year. Rome Odunze drafted last year. Loveland and Burden drafted this year. I mean, you're talking about having this past game that's really all of them are under 23 years old at this point. I mean, that's long-term success. Great success for a while. All right, I'll stop fanboying over here over Colston Loveland.
Yeah.
Well, we'll I promise.
I'm sure we'll talk about him in another segment.
We're going to talk about him soon. Just give us like half an hour and we'll talk about him again. I promise. I'm not dropping this. Number 8, Abdul Carter, edge to the New York Giants. So having my top-ranked player fall to number 3 actually represents great value, but Carter is also a great fit in the Giants' defense that established stars in the defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence II and edge rusher Brian Burns. Carter doesn't have the carry the defense right away. Doesn't have to carry the defense right away, and can be used the way that the Cowboys used Micah Parsons as a rookie. He'll play some linebacker, rush the passer, and be a defensive chess piece. I really liked Abdul Carter coming out of college, so I do agree with with him. Again, I think it's really hard to quantify value when he's ranked as the number 1 player and he goes number 3. I mean, yes, I understand that is quote unquote value, but it's not really. Some of these other ones, like you said, dropped like 40 spots.
Yeah.
In this case, it's like you dropped 2, and that was really anticipated.
Yeah.
Number 9, Malachi Starks, safety to the Baltimore Ravens.
Can we just talk about how badass of a name that is, first of all? Malachi. Love that.
I like Malachi. I like the whole entire name.
Yeah, sounds
Malachi
like a
Starks
superhero.
just sounds like he's going to hit the piss out of you.
Yeah.
He was projected as Matt Miller's 21st overall prospect, and he got drafted as the 27th overall. Matt Miller projected Starks to Baltimore in his final mock draft because of how much the scheme fit made sense for both prospect and team. Starks' ability to play deep safety in the slot or in a 2-safety set makes him a match with star Ravens safety Kyle Hamilton. Starks' coverage instincts will get him on the field early, and selected at the 27th overall pick was incredibly smart and good value. And that is going to lead us to our number 10. And guess what? We're going to talk about this in a lot more detail in our very next segment. But
What?
I know. Number 10, Shedeur Sanders.
Yep.
Shedeur Sanders was ranked on Matt Miller's board as 25th overall. He ended up getting picked 144th overall in the 5th round.
What pick would he have been when that prank call went through, though?
He called from the Saints, so number 9.
Okay.
So yes, the prank call would have drafted him at number 9, and he ended up going 144.
That's really heartbreaking. I do feel for that guy.
I know. I know. That's difficult. All right, so quickly, write-up by Matt Miller. Regardless of why Shedeur fell in the draft, getting a prospect universally ranked in the top 32 at number 144 represents terrific value for the Browns. I graded Sanders as a starter-level quarterback, someone realistically on par with Geno Smith coming out of college. If Sanders' career matches Smith's, the former Colorado QB will be one of the biggest steals of the draft in the last 10 years. So we are definitely going to get into more on why Shedeur fell, and we're going to also compare him to another player who had some influence by their father.
Aha.
All right,
Who could
so
that be?
I know it's going to be a mystery, but all you have to do is just wait like 2 seconds for us to get into our next segment here on Pup Conversion. And welcome back to Pup Conversion. Before the break, we had talked about the top 10 in Matt Miller's overall value rankings for the 2025 NFL Draft. And number 10 was Shedeur Sanders.
And that also goes back to my question of why did so many people that were projected to be so highly picked end up falling so far? And Shedeur, I feel like it's a prime example of that.
I agree, but what I think is super interesting is I think that a lot of the reason why Shedeur fell was because of the way in which he prepped for the draft.
Okay, what do you mean?
I think that there is teams that are now coming out and mentioning that he was going in here with almost an air of ignorance. I'm not ignorance, I'm sorry. An air of just being better than he really was. Like he deserved to be picked very, very high. So, for example, one of them is, well, on the Dan Patrick show, one of the scouts said that he had flown out to Denver. I was told I could talk to Shedeur after Wednesday's practice at Colorado. I go to the practice. I'm in Boulder, Colorado. After the practice, I'm told, well, he got banged up against Nebraska, needed treatment, and can't meet with you. But he'll meet with you on Friday at the production meeting. So then Friday at the production meeting, we talked to Deion Sanders, who is great, and the coordinators. No Shedeur. We weren't really given a reason. As you know, starting quarterback, usually a high-profile player like that, that's pretty unusual. So then the scout said that he later went to Shedeur. He went to outside, and he saw that Shedeur Sanders was just sitting in the back of the truck outside of a hotel and never gave a reason why. He just skipped the meeting.
Wow.
It's kind of just stuff like that where I'm not saying that means that you should fall as far as he did, but at the same time, you got to take some of this stuff seriously. I mean, just missing meetings, I don't know. And, I could say that it's just one, but then per Todd McShay, NFL draft expert, his quote was, Shedeur didn't have a great interview with Brian Dable in a private visit. An install package came in. Preparation wasn't there for it. He got called out on it, and he didn't like that. And Brian Dable, head coach of the Giants, didn't appreciate him not liking it. So it's something where he's basically told, hey, study this before you come to your meeting. He doesn't study it. And then he gets offended by the fact that he was asked to look over it.
Yeah.
I think it's just, I don't know. I just don't necessarily feel like that is a great look when you're first coming out of college.
Yeah. So, what was it, you think? Was it the fact, oh, I got a famous daddy, so I could just do whatever I want? Do you think that, everybody, filled his head too big, and so he needed to take his ego down a notch?
I think it's a combination of a lot of different things, and I think where a lot of it stems, in my opinion, is I do think that it does have something to do with the whole thing of having a famous father.
Yeah.
I think that it's manifesting in different ways. So, for example, we had mentioned this during our cast last week. Shedeur Sanders does not have an official agent. He's being represented by his father, and unfortunately, that led to some problems because I just learned this last week. Once you start going into that second, third round, a lot of the times the players' agents are reaching out to the teams and saying, hey, you know what? Gosh, we'd really love to, and really be able to promote them. But because Shedeur didn't have an official agent, that wasn't happening.
Oh. So
I think that started manifesting in going back to having Deion Sanders as his dad. And I think that's not putting shade on Deion. It's just the fact that it almost seems like he was handed a lot of different things as far as you came to Colorado, now you're the starting quarterback automatically.
Yeah.
You were hyped up on being the second best quarterback in this draft. None of that really played out the way that it should have. And to be honest with you, talking about the handing out of stuff, when you, in any professional sport, your number is retired when you have done something absolutely magnificent. We discussed it last week. He had negative rushing yards based on the amount of sacks that he had. His number got retired in Boulder, Colorado. And it's just, you look at it, and it's not just that he got handed the starting quarterback job. He's also getting his number retired. And for what? Yeah. Having 2 years of doing basically nothing in college? I'm not saying that he didn't have any stats, but you have negative rushing yards. You didn't win a national championship. You didn't even get close to that. And you're going to sit here and you're going to get your number retired for that?
Yeah.
I mean, as compared, you look at the other person that got his number retired next to Shedeur was Travis Hunter, who was the two-way player. He won a Heisman. He went second overall to the Jags. That's a guy that I'd say, okay, in college, fine. I will make the argument, fine. I think if nothing else, doing it immediately is a bad look. Maybe you go 5 years down the road and Shedeur actually proves himself in the NFL, and then you go, oh, you know what? Colorado legend Shedeur Sanders. He's proven absolutely nothing to get his number retired.
Yeah, it kind of smacks of nepotism at that point.
Right. So I think that really hurt his draft stock. And okay, here's another, I've just found a lot of different stuff in this past week when the dust has settled. NFL Hall of Famer Chris Carter says Shedeur Sanders' entitlement and measurables weren't enough for the first round draft pick. He says being likable plays a part in the draft, and the fact that Shedeur had already put together a merch line stating he is quote-unquote legendary was off-putting. Carter claims that the NFL didn't sabotage Sanders. They taught him a great lesson, and now he knows he's not running anything.
Yeah.
It's the entitlement thing. Yes, I do agree with that. Putting together an entire merch line that says I'm legendary, I mean, You kind of saw it. Like, they kept flashing to his little draft room that he had all set up with legendary all over the place.
Was he the one that was never on the couch, though?
Yes.
He was actually never in the frame?
Correct.
So he was too cool to also be present for the thing that they set up nationally televised cameras for.
Yes. I think it all points to this whole thing of feeling like he's great. And, here's something that I think is interesting. Deion Sanders last year, going into the college season, said that there's only certain teams that Shedeur and Travis Hunter will play for. Let me just say this really quickly. Sir, Shedeur Sanders is your son. Fine. You want to pull the whole Eli Manning thing? That's fine. Travis Hunter is not your child. What are you saying that there's certain teams that are not allowed to draft him?
Yeah. Well, and what was it? Was it Shedeur that was like, oh, any of the teams that don't draft me, I'm not playing for?
Yeah, which is just a stupid comment, because of course you're not going to play for teams that didn't draft you.
Right, like, okay, if only there's, 32 teams, only one of them can draft you. You can't be drafted by multiple teams, so you're just going to never play for any other team ever again because the other 31 didn't draft you?
Who knows? People just make comments. But circling back to my thought, Deion Sanders said there's only certain teams Shedeur will play for.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of the teams that he specifically said Shedeur will not play for is the Cleveland Browns, who then drafted him in the 5th round.
Okay, so you're also showing you're toothless then.
Right, you're showing that I specifically said, and yes, Deion did walk it back before the draft. Oh, you know what? Shedeur will just be humbled by whatever team decides to draft him. He had to walk back his comments just because of the fact that he built him up to be this next great quarterback, and the NFL looked at it and said, oh, we're just not feeling it.
Yeah. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that, like, what happens is you get drafted, and then you, like, train with the team, and then before the season starts, they have an opportunity to be like, yeah, no, this ain't working out, and they can kick you to the curb, right? Or no?
I mean, they can't cut you. I don't think that somebody like Shedeur, they're not going to cut.
No.
I don't think so, just because I think there is a handful of teams that would be immediately scooping him.
That's fair.
Simply because he's a rookie.
Yeah.
I think that he had first-round grades on him initially, so I think any team would be willing to. I think what gets really complicated about this is the Browns' quarterback room is way overcrowded at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, they signed Joe Flacco, as the veteran backup. They traded for Kenny Pickett and on the offseason for the Eagles. You still have Deshaun Watson technically under contract for this year, which, whatever, we don't know what he's going to do with his injury. Yes, you got Shedeur, but earlier in the draft, you also drafted Gabriel out of Oregon. And now what? So now you have 5 quarterbacks. The most any team ever carries is 3.
Yeah.
So
they gotta cut somebody then, I would think.
You probably have to cut 2 people.
Yeah.
And who are you cutting it? What are you doing? Like, you can't cut Deshaun Watson because of the fact that he's injured, so he's gonna hang around.
Yeah.
So okay, maybe you only cut one of them, but still, you signed a guy, traded for a guy, and drafted 2. Like, and what's even more complicated about what Cleveland did is he drafted 2 quarterbacks, and then turned around and with 2 of their other picks, he drafted 2 different running backs. So it's like, we don't really know what we're doing here. Huh?
Were they planning at all?
I don't know. I think that there was a tweet that went out that I think like just explained absolutely everything. The Cleveland Browns fell asleep on the clock, and that Yahoo Sports just auto-drafted Shedeur Sanders for them. So, I mean, I think that explains absolutely everything. I think he got auto-drafted.
Yeah, I mean, that would track. But I know, like, I had brought this up. I don't think it was on the podcast. I think it was just in our natural conversations. But, like, the whole Shedeur and Daddy situation feels a lot like, what's-his-face? The Ball situation.
LeVar Ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because LeVar Ball was very, very instrumental in the Ball, there's 3 of them, Ball sons' NBA careers. It was highly publicized. He was doing a lot of intense training and promotion, and was very overbearing. I mean, the stuff in which he was doing, I mean, I started researching this a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing stuff like pulling his kids out of college to not play college ball to go to the Turkish league. So it's stuff like that. Or this one got me. He actually created a basketball sub league specifically so that his sons could play in it. So it's just like, it's really weird stuff that he did, and I do think that to a certain extent that I want to say that hurt their draft stock, but I'm gonna be honest here. I mean, Lonzo Ball got drafted in, I believe, the top 4. LaMelo got drafted in the top 3.
Okay.
So I mean, I think that he was very, very, very much instrumental in really swaying his son's future, but I think that it didn't really affect their draft status, which is really interesting. And I do feel like Deion's did.
Yeah.
I think what's kind of funny is LeVar Ball had some pretty good quotes that I had dug up. Like, if Charles Barkley thought like me, maybe he would have won a championship. Okay, I mean, I guess. Or, these boys were born to go pro. Your mom's a PE teacher. I'm a personal trainer. Your last name is Ball. How much more can you be lined up for this? Okay.
Yeah, because clearly the last name has a lot to do with their chosen profession.
Right, clearly.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is, in that case, LeVar Ball said before Lonzo was drafted, my son will only play for the Lakers. And that was in February of 2017. And that's exactly what happened. The Lakers drafted him.
Interesting.
So it is interesting when you're comparing the two of them next to each other, where Deion specifically said there's certain teams he's not going to play for, and then had to walk that back, and then he ended up getting drafted in the 5th round by a team that Deion had specifically said was not going to draft him.
Yeah. And
somehow that worked out, but then you have LeVar that said he's only going to play for this one team. And this one team goes, you know what, son of a bitch, I'm in. Yeah, let's do it. Like, it's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're comparing them, I think that there's a lot of history of parents getting very involved with their kids' careers. I think sometimes it can be beneficial, but I think there's a lot of times when you do see that it affects them. And you know what? Maybe in this case it's showing up on the draft boards, but then, unfortunately there's sometimes where when you have the overbearing parents, it's showing up in the way that the kids play. They're not playing as loosely as they would have if they didn't have such overbearing parents, or the different things that they do, like the diets that they put them on. I mean, there's some ridiculous stuff. I mean, they're talking about it on the radio that, oh God, I'm trying to remember the name, but the main thing there was that growing up, they had to bring their own cake to every single get-together because of the fact that they were not allowed to eat anything with flour in it, because that was going to hurt their development to become an NFL pro someday. And it's like, I don't know. I understand to a certain extent if you want your kid to be a professional athlete, but I think you kind of let them decide what they want to do. And I feel like there's plenty of cases where you have overbearing parents, and I think in this case that's what hurt Shedeur Sanders. I think overbearing dad really hurt him in this case.
Yeah, I think you're right.
All right, so we are going to get to our third segment where we are going to talk about the Chicago Bears that got drafted and take a little deep dive into them here on the TwoPupConversion. And welcome back to TwoPupConversion, segment 3. Thank you, Judge. How bilingual of you.
Yeah.
All right. What?
I said I can keep going.
Oh, God.
I know how to count to 3 in a couple other languages, but we'll run out real fast.
Are we trying to appeal to the largest mass possible?
Yeah, sure. Diversity.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion here on TwoPupConversion.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we are now going to move into the more hometown side of this podcast, and we're going to go over the Bears picks that they made in the past draft.
Including the ones that we talked about in segment 1.
Yes. So a little bit more deep dive on this. So with The 10th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, Bears selected Colston Loveland.
The one that you're fangirling over.
Okay, just a little bit, okay?
Uh-huh.
I might or might not have made him fan art to take home with him.
It's pretty cool, though. I mean, fan art almost sounds like it's degrading it. Like, it's genuinely, like, a really well-done graphic design Photoshop montage type thing. Like, it's very cool.
Well, thank you. Do you think that it would mean more to him if I drew him a picture with crayon? I mean, that's still on the table. We still have like 2 weeks till the signing. I can make him a really badass crayon drawing.
What if you just do that as like the fake out? Like, so you give him this crayon drawing and you're like, I made this, and then he's like, oh, thank you, and you're like, nah, I'm kidding, and then you bring out this like beautiful like, I don't know, Da Vinci masterpiece of a Photoshop edit. I think he'd be even more impressed then because he thought that you were just capable of crayon art. So
you're really giving me Da Vinci art on this? Wow.
It was very good.
Okay. You know what? That's like the most positive you've ever been.
I know, and then vice versa. I make something that's really good for dinner or whatever, and you're like, wow, this isn't awful. This doesn't completely suck, and that's the best that I can get from you.
That is the highest praise from me, okay? Know your place.
Anyway, so Loveland.
Colston Loveland. So, NFL expert, ex-QB, Robert Griffin III, his comment on Colston Loveland was that he is the locksmith. The locksmith. Because no defense has the key to stop him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is he doing that's so special?
I think the biggest thing is the NFL over the years really has gotten away from just having, like back in the day, a tight end was just another blocker.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the more successful teams have those tight ends that are now going out and pass catching as well. That's your George Kittles, your Travis Kelce's, last year, Brock Bowers.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys who can just go out there and can get those contested balls and just really be a dual threat. So somebody like Loveland is almost like taking and having another wide receiver out there because he can run routes really well. Like, I mean, better than the other tight ends in this class, including even your Tyler Warren. Loveland is going to be able to stretch the field, meaning that he's going to be able to run deeper routes. He's going to be able to, one of my favorite terms that they say when you have a fast guy on the field, he's going to be able to take the top off the defense.
Ah.
I mean...
My favorite is when they say, in space.
In space?
Okay, so I guess my question with like Loveland, or I guess with all the guys, is like you talk a lot about how college ball is a totally different ball game in certain regards. So like, how do you think that our rookies are going to do translating to the NFL?
I think it's a good question. I think it's fair. I think a lot of the times, the most difficult transition is the quarterback position, and a lot of that is because there's certain routes that they can. That they can be ran in in college. It cannot be ran necessarily in the NFL, and sometimes quarterbacks get used to that. Like, for example, there's certain routes where with the offensive linemen, they're able to block and engage with defenders up to 3 to 5 yards off the line of scrimmage. In the NFL, you're only allowed to block up to 1 yard past the line of scrimmage. So now it's something where your offensive linemen are able to climb up a lot further and are able to block a lot better for certain plays. And then you go to the NFL and you can't run those plays anymore because now if the offensive lineman is blocking past that 1 yard line, it's a penalty.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Which is...
So it's like a smaller pocket then, right?
Yeah, it makes it so that people are closer to you.
Yeah.
So going back to Loveland, I think this is a really interesting stat. RG3 had said that he's a matchup nightmare. He had 75% of his total catches in college go for first downs.
Wow.
So he's going to be a really good weapon for Caleb in short as well as long situations where you really need somebody to just get that ball and get you the first down. Loveland's really good at that.
Okay. Bears could use that.
Absolutely. All right, so moving into our second round, our first of our second round picks. There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
There's 3 of them we actually drafted in the second round, which is interesting. Luther Burden III.
Yes.
So going back to RG3, according to RG3, he had tweeted that the Chicago Bears got a top 15 pick in the second round with Luther Burden III. This guy has been the best athlete on the field every time he steps on it. Fast and explosive playmaker with the ball in his hands, who can play inside, outside, and out of the backfield. He is their Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Okay. Sorry, you said something about him being like, RG3 said he was the top 13?
Top
pick?
15. Got a top 15
pick.
pick in the second round.
Okay, so then I'm trying to figure out, I think I'm thinking of it backwards. So I was trying to figure out if we overpaid for him, but if he was top 15, that means he should have gone in the first round, but then he dropped to the second round, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, they're saying he's a top 15 pick, and we picked him over 39. So, I mean, it really was an absolute value pick, and that's why Matt Miller had it as his number 1 value pick out of the entire NFL draft.
Gotcha, okay.
So, definitely, I think that's a really fun pick, because now you've got Loveland and you've got Burden, like we were discussing in our first segment, on top of all the weapons you already had in the Dunze and DJ Moore and Cole Kmet. I mean, it's absolutely no shade against Olamide Zaccheaus, who we ended up signing potentially to be that slot receiver. But Luther Burden, I mean, we're talking about a really legitimate talent here that is now going to be able to help be that speed slot that we really needed.
Yeah, definitely.
So that was our first of our many second round picks. Our next one was at pick 56, so we had traded down. It came out later that really at the second round picks, we were trying to get one of the top running backs.
Mm-hmm.
I think the goal was to try to go after Travion Henderson out of Ohio State, and unfortunately, he got snapped by the Patriots right before the Bears picked.
Gotcha.
So then we ended up trading down, and there we got offensive tackle from Boston College, Ozzie Trapillo.
Okay.
So Ozzie Trapillo is a massive man, and it sounds like he's better as a right tackle than a left tackle. But there's rumors, we will see how true it is, but there's actually rumors that Darnell Wright, who has been the staple on the right side, might end up being able to try to go over to left tackle, and then you'd start Trapillo at right tackle.
Okay, that would make sense.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of movement there. Ozzie Trapillo is 6'8", 316 pounds.
Wow,
So
that is
big,
a big man.
big man. So I think that when polls went into this draft, I think the thing was draft the best guy we have available and go after things in which their needs. But like in this case, we had a very productive free agency in remaking the offensive line. But all it takes is one injury, and then suddenly it's like, oh, what's next? So getting somebody like Ozzie Trapillo is a really good way to ensure that you have a backup plan just in case, and then maybe he does end up starting.
Yeah. Well, and that was going to be my next question, too, is because we were so active in free agency, what did we end up duplicating efforts in places, or was it something where for the most part we ended up filling the holes that we didn't fill with the free agency?
It's a good question. I think there are certain spots where they weren't dire needs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would argue the Luther Burden pick was more of a luxury pick than a need, simply because we already had our top 2 and Zaccheaus was your slot.
Mm-hmm.
So we just upgraded that a little bit.
Okay.
And I think you're gonna see a little bit more of that as we continue. So our last second round pick, 62 overall, Shamar Turner, defensive tackle from Texas A&M. Again, this is something where we need the depth at defensive tackle, and we don't know what's gonna happen next because defensive tackle. Last year, you had Big Bill, Andrew Billings, who was really doing well for us, especially run stuff, and he got hurt. it just wasn't the same defense last year.
Yeah.
Then suddenly they could run on them. Jerron Dexter had a good start to the season and started kind of tailing off towards the end. I think a lot of that is because Big Bill was gone. They're still on the roster, both of them. You got Grady Jarrett. So Shamar Turner is more... You'd look at it and say it's a depth piece, but what's really super interesting about Shamar Turner is he's played on every single spot on the defensive line, so he can play defensive end. This is not necessarily where... He played on the end, he played in the middle, but it sounds like in order to try to improve his draft stock, he went and was listed as a defensive tackle, but he could play anywhere on that line. So it's a depth piece that can go multiple positions for you, and I think that you're gonna see him start some of the games. I'm not saying every single one, but I think that he really has the capabilities to start for the Bears at some point.
So we've got two players that we picked up in the draft that are versatile in terms of, well, I suppose possibly three, are versatile in terms of being able to play different positions on the field. Is that something that's pretty common among football players? I almost said sports ball, but I know you would have kicked me.
Oh, God, not sports ball. Yeah, I mean, I think that position flexibility is important. Now, something weird like Travis Hunter playing corner and wide receiver, that's not something common in the slightest.
Okay.
He's a freak for doing that. And, I mean, it's kind of that Shohei Ohtani playing both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
But being able to play, across the entire defensive line is something that you can do. I think here's where it gets challenging. Your defensive tackles are usually bigger dudes.
Mm-hmm.
They're the guys that can clog up the middle. Your defensive ends are usually bigger, leaner guys because they need to be able to bend the edge and get to the quarterback. So in order to do something like that, you can't be, a 350-pound monstrosity, So
Yeah.
it kind of takes a different athletic type for the different positions. But yeah, I think you still could, you still could have that position flexibility.
Gotcha.
Shamar Turner's quote when they talked to him about the way he plays: "As soon as I touch the field, all I do is go, man. I've had that mentality since I was a kid. It's just a fire inside me. I just take their lunch money."
As soon as you said all I do is go, instantly I was thinking of Forrest Gump running through the back of the end zone going home.
Oh, okay. I was thinking all you do is win, win, win. But you're Forrest Gumping it, apparently.
Yeah, well, I'm old at heart, so I guess that tracks that I would do an old person reference.
All right, so then we did not have a third-round pick because we ended up using that third-round pick paired up with our 41st overall pick. And, I mean, yes, there's still some other little pieces, but basically what we did is we traded away 41 in our third and then moved back to pick 56, as well as moving up from our third-round pick into the back end at 62 of the second round. I know it's a lot of maneuvering, but, I mean, that's the basics of it. So then moving into the fourth round, pick 132 overall, Ruben Hippolyte, the second, the linebacker out of Maryland.
All right, another awesome name. I love that.
You like Ruben Hippolyte?
Hippolyte. I mean, that sounds like Greek or something almost. Like hippocampus,
Okay.
hippogriff.
Okay.
I don't know. I like it. I dig it.
Okay. I like it.
That's my take on my contribution here.
So, Ruben Hippolyte, he was the first player who was drafted in this particular draft class that did not actually go to the combine. So it's interesting that the Bears had their eyes on him, and he wasn't necessarily the most well-known player, but it sounds like he really does have the potential to do stuff for the Bears. It's really interesting is there's a draft podcast with Field Yates and Mel Kiper, and they do this really interesting under-the-radar thing called their Orange Crusher of the Week, and Ruben Hippolyte was one of the first to be highlighted on there.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think that's again, that's going to be a depth piece. You already have your TJ Edwards. You already have your Tremaine Edmonds. Where I think Hippolyte could slide in is Jack Sanborn left in free agency and went to Dallas. So I think this is where Hippolyte could come in. He could be that third linebacker, and that's where I think he's going to make his impact.
Gotcha.
Fifth round, 169 overall, Za Frazier, quarterback, UTSA.
Is Zal short for something besides pizza? Because I'm pretty sure they didn't name him Pizza.
Okay, how confident are you on that?
That they didn't name him Pizza?
Yeah.
I was gonna say 99%, but
Okay.
I don't know. You're questioning me now. I'm not so sure.
They didn't even Mr. Pizza. Zaquan.
Oh, okay.
Zaquan. Zahquan Frazier.
Gotcha. Anyway.
Yeah. So I know I've said it a lot. That's a depth piece. And I'm saying that simply because of the fact that you've signed big contracts with Jalen Johnson.
Mm.
You just locked up Kyler Gordon. So I think Zah Frazier is going to be more of a depth piece. However, they did get intel from their scouting department saying that this was a guy in which they really wanted to bring into the building. He did play college for a couple of different places. Yes, his last season was UTSA, but he also did play for Southern Illinois. So I think that kind of helps a little bit simply because of the fact that they were kind of familiar with his play style.
Yeah.
All right. Round 6, pick 195 overall, Luke Newman, offensive guard, Michigan State. Again, it's depth. It's really just trying to build up that offensive line. So if you have one guy go down, then your season's not completely lost. And we saw what Ben Johnson did with offensive linemen. He's very famous for saying, hey, you know what? This guy's going to check into the game. And then suddenly you have your 300-pound offensive lineman in the end zone celebrating because he just caught a touchdown. So I think having those depth pieces is going to be very helpful going into this year. And to double down on that, it sounds like Newman was more on the left side. And that's where you got your boy Joe Tooney, who's 32. So having somebody behind him as a, hey, learn behind Tooney, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, and to round out the draft, round 7, pick 233. Finally, the Bears got their running back in Kyle Monangai.
Okay.
Out of Rutgers.
Do you feel like they waited too long to get that piece, or do you think it was okay that they got him back there?
I wasn't sure at first. I will be completely honest with you. I was not 100% confident. But that I started to hear some of the statistics. He was a unanimous first team All Big Ten. His career stats were 3,222 yards with 27 touchdowns. He ran a 4.6 40-yard dash. He had 139 missed tackles forced, which was first in NCAA since 2023. And the statistic that is going to excite me the most, he had 676 carries in college. 0 fumbles.
Wow.
He never fumbled the ball. And
yeah,
I
need people to handle that.
Yes. I mean, I understand that it's like, oh, don't fumble the ball. So obvious. But it's not always that simple. I mean, guys get their hats on the ball sometimes. It pops loose. You know, you happen to get a bad flip from the quarterback. And this guy, I mean, 0 fumbles. To me, ball security is huge.
Yeah, definitely.
And one more stat I wanted to give you before we wrap up this segment. Ozzy Trapillo, going back to him really quickly.
Yeah.
In 772 offensive snaps in 2024, 0 penalties. So you're seeing this pattern throughout the draft is you're getting guys that are very disciplined, which is huge because that's not something that we can always say for the Bears. I mean, last year, speaking of disciplined versus undisciplined, you had cornerback Tyreek Stevenson taunting Washington fans for the first 4 seconds of the play that ended up in the famous Hail Mary that absolutely derailed the entire season.
Yeah.
Now you go out and in the first draft under Ben Johnson, under a brand new coach, under a brand new regime, you get a offensive lineman that had 0 penalties last year and a running back that had 0 fumbles in college.
Yeah. We need people to just go in, put their heads down, and play ball.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like I think overall the Bears did a good job in this draft. I think that's why I want to wrap this segment. Overall, I am not going to sit here and say that they got all the flashy players. Oh my God, they didn't go out and trade up from 10 to go get Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter. And I understand that. But I think that with what Ben Johnson is trying to build, I think that these were the right picks. And I'm very excited to see what the Bears do next season.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we are going to wrap up the segment here. We'll be right back. When we come back, The key question, how did Ben Johnson lure one of the best offensive line coaches in football to Chicago?
Okay.
Find out that when you come back to Pup Conversion. And welcome back to our final segment of Pup Conversion for this week. On our little break in between segments, I am being made fun of because I'm old, apparently.
Because you literally played audio out of your iPhone, and then you asked if I could hear it too, and I said yes, because you don't have the headphones that are on your head plugged into your iPhone currently.
I am. The problem is you have a point. I'm just trying to be conscientious as the host of this show to make sure you can hear it too.
Okay, well, I'm going to be doing dementia checks on you now, because apparently you don't know when headphones are plugged in and when they aren't, so...
I forgot, who are you again?
Who am I?
Alright, the final segment of today. So there's an article that got published by Eric Lambert, who had gone over one of the key additions that Ben Johnson had made to his coaching staff. Dan Richard is regarded as one of the better offensive line coaches in not just the NFL, because he's been in the college ranks for a bit now.
Mm-hmm.
But he's regarded as one of the better, if not best, offensive line coaches in football, and he's able to draw him to the Bears. And what I just thought was super interesting is it goes back to one of the first things we talked about, that Ben Johnson effect, that people want to be around Ben. Mm-hmm. And I think that it just all goes back into everyone wants to be around Ben. Everyone is seeing something special in Chicago. And, they want to be around Caleb Williams. I mean, that's what drew Ben Johnson here. So I just feel like everything is kind of stacking on top of each other for a very successful season. And let's just start off with this audio, courtesy of Bears Weekly.
Veteran offensive line coach, and during his 5 seasons as offensive line coach, the Saints had one of the highest ranking offensive units in the NFL. Points were popping. Drew Brees was authoring a Hall of Fame career, and now I got Ben Johnson that brought you in, who put up numbers that were eye-popping over there with the Detroit Lions. What has that been like as you guys are creating a Bears offense? It's not necessarily going to replicate exactly what they did up there. You're going to adapt to the players you have and the new ideas that are brought in here. But your backgrounds and everything, how's it all meshing?
Well, Jeff, it's been fantastic. When I came to interview, I didn't know Ben. I had spoken with him on the phone. We had mutual relationships, but he and I had never been together. And I've interviewed with a number of play callers, and they're all unique in their style. But Ben was the first guy that I've been around that spoke offensive line language. He knew technique. He wanted to understand technique. And I found it from the day I've gotten with him to today, very consistent. He has a strong vision. When I watch his teams play, you certainly see the physical, aggressive style of play, but there's a lot of variance. And I think for Tom, he'd appreciate it. In New Orleans, we were really a unique style of team because Drew was a drop-back, shotgun quarterback, and we were limited in the run game with him. So our runs came from underneath center, more downhill, if you will. And that was a challenge in itself. Now, when you put it all together, our ability to move the launch point, to have guys be aggressive in their set patterns or their run action patterns or pull, or that's all related to the run game. And if I were an offensive lineman and I was looking around for what's gonna help my game the most, it's gonna be playing for a guy like Ben.
So I just think that's just really cool to hear.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, if I can take a couple seconds to break it down.
Go for it.
I recently took some leadership classes with the master's program that I'm going through, and it was talking about the leadership traits or what makes a good leader. And one of the things that I found was really interesting about that is talking about having a strong vision. That is a really key thing to have as a leader, because it can, if you don't know the path that you want to set your team on, how can you set your team up for success, and how do they know what they're following? But also, he kind of alluded to it. He said something about like he knows the techniques for offensive line, or I think that's what he said, but then he also wants to know the techniques. So one of the important things about being a leader is owning what you don't know
Yeah.
and relying on your team who has the skill set that you need. So if he can respect and say, hey, listen, I know this side of the ball, but I don't know that side, but you know that because that's what your position is, and he lets them have their voice in that space, I feel like that's going to be what makes him a pivotal leader.
Absolutely. I just think it's so cool that Ben Johnson is just drawing these absolutely impressive candidates. I mean, you just look up and down this staff, and yes, I think it's easy when you leave a team like Detroit and you're able to bring a couple of your sub coaches with you. So like wide receivers coach Antoine Randall L. I think it's really easy because you already have that relationship. I think personally, what was key in that soundbite we heard is Richard said that he had never met Ben Johnson in person. And for Ben Johnson to just have such a, I mean, for lack of a better term, to have such an aura around him that other people want to play when they haven't even met him face to face, I just feel like is so cool.
Yeah, to be inspired. That's another leadership quality, talking about like transformational leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that says a lot. And looking through the rest of the article by Eric Lambert, he was saying that he had really proven himself, and it was mentioned a little bit in the soundbite, of the extended run with the New Orleans when he was churning out multiple eventual Pro Bowlers. After that, Richard had gone over to Tulane, where he helped their program become dominant at run blocking almost immediately. The Bears head coach Ben Johnson knew he needed somebody with credibility and a strong track record if he was going to turn a line around that gave up 68 sacks in 2024, and he used those connections and his experience to be able to then get Richard to come over to Chicago. And that's just such a great pedigree to have. And it's so exciting that it's being recognized just how great Ben Johnson is.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it seem very promising that everybody has good things to say about him. More so promising than the previous leadership, past couple of previous leaders that we've had with the Bears.
Absolutely. I mean, you're going from somebody that was, I mean, he turned into a joke name, Eberflus.
Yeah.
Like the whole, oh, what's up yours thing. Yeah, we laugh about it, but it's because he was a joke. He was not being taken seriously. And now you have somebody that legitimately is a threat in the NFL to be a top 5 coach. He's getting paid in the top 10 of coaches, but there's other teams that I know are looking at the Bears and going, oh shoot, they got Ben Johnson?
Mm-hmm.
And it's cool because as Bears fans, I mean, you've known me for a while, obviously. You know how optimistic I am about the Bears. Every year it's like, oh yeah, no, it's going to be a better year. It's going to be a better year. But it's really cool when you start looking at the experts and they're breaking it down. And yes, it's easy for them Chicago analysts to be positive to a certain extent, but then to also see getting high-profile assistant coaches is really cool, because what it's proving is that somebody like Richard is looking at us and saying, hey, you know what? With Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson's ideas, it's going to allow that offensive line to be more aggressive, and that's the way that Richard thrives. And I think it's one of those where, like last year, there was a lot of scheme that would not have worked with the scheme in which Richard would bring to the Bears offensive line, but that's not the way Ben Johnson works. He doesn't have this almost like passive way of doing things. He doesn't have drop back passes and slow developing runs from shotgun. Stuff like that is a thing of the past. Now you have this aggressive attack. You have these innovative play calls that's going to make Richard's offensive line look really good, because you're not having Caleb Williams hold on to the ball forever. It's now going to be something where you're going to see a lot more quick hitters. And I mean, circling back to basically everything we've talked about in this podcast, this is why you need those weapons. You need guys that can get open, because now if Caleb snaps the ball and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you know what? Now there's somebody in his lap and he's sacked. But now, off the line, suddenly, Colston Loveland, over the middle, 1-2, bam, he hits him. Oh, Luther Burden, open down the seam, hits him. Like, it's going to be so much quicker developing plays because you have guys that can get open, which is huge.
Absolutely. And also, if you can get some protection in the pocket, I mean, that's what I kept saying is he doesn't have time to throw it if they keep collapsing the pocket on him. But then you also get other guys like that last guy I think it was that we were talking about where he is a ball magnet. He can hold on to it. He doesn't have any fumbles. Okay, so even if it is a rushed last second, kind of chuck it over and try to, to pray for a miracle, if that guy can get the hands on it, the new rookie that we got, then it sounds like he should have a pretty consistent record of keeping it.
Yeah, and I think you can kind of see, I'm not saying you're always going to be able to do apples to apples when it comes to the Lions offense and now Ben Johnson's offense with the Bears, but there's certain pieces that you can say, oh, you know what, that's interesting because that guy is on the Bears, it was Ben Johnson's blank. Mm-hmm. So it's something where, like, for example, the thought was you need that speed guy, and the speed guy in Detroit was Jameson Williams. Mm-hmm. They're thinking Luther Burden III can be exactly that. He can be that speed threat. He can be that guy that's going to be able to get open and be able to add some quickness to that offense. And I think what's interesting is Jameson Williams reached out to Ben Johnson as soon as they made the pick to pick Luther Burden. And the first thing he said was, dude, you got a beast just like me when we drafted Luther Burden. So even Ben Johnson's old team is reaching out and being like, dude, yeah, you got a guy. Like, it's so cool that, like, even teams within the league, even players within the league are like, oh my God, yeah, the Bears got better. The Bears got better. And it's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's exciting. And, sky is the limit. And I think that certain things have just worked out well in the Bears' favor. I think that there was some question marks when it came to the trade that Poles had made back in 2023 when he had traded away the first overall pick to Carolina. Mm-hmm. Dust is cleared on that. And now what that became was Panthers got first overall pick, selected Bryce Young. The Bears got DJ Moore, offensive tackle Darnell Wright, cornerback Tyreek Stevenson, quarterback Caleb Williams, punter Torrey Taylor, and wide receiver Luther Burden III. So what you're saying is by trading away that first overall pick, you got your quarterback, you got two of your starting wide receivers, you got one of the bookends to protect your quarterback, plus your corner two, plus your all-pro punter. I mean, it was a good trade that I think really restarted this rebuild and jump-started it.
Yeah, sounds like it.
So I think that was going to be huge. I think that's going to be looked at as one of the biggest steals of all time as far as we won that trade. I mean, I don't see how you can look at those results and not feel like we won that trade.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely.
So I think sky's the limit with the Bears this year. I mean, you just look at 3 years ago when this rebuild started, okay? You're just comparing the starting 4 pass catchers from 2025 back to 2022. So again, 3 years. Your number one wide receiver, Darnell Mooney. Now, DJ Moore. 2022, your wide receiver 2, Ekamarius St. Brown. Now, Rome Odunze. 2022, your wide receiver 3, Dante Pettis. Now, Luther Burden III. Your starting tight end, Cole Kmet. Now you still have Kmet, except for you also got a better pass-catching tight end as well in Colston Loveland. You look at this starting lineup, it is like a brand new team. I mean, It is incredible what the Bears have been able to do in a really short amount of time. And I do think so much of it is that Ben Johnson effect. Just what they've been able to do on this offseason to be able to take an offensive line that gave up the second most sacks of all time in a season. And now you went out and you basically completely gutted the offensive line, You got 3 brand new starters in the middle. You got your bookend in Darnell Wright to the right. Potentially could move to left because he's saying he has a position flexibility. And you got Ozzy Trapillo. Plus you also got Newman. I mean, there's just a lot that they've been able to do in a very short amount of time. And I think that it's going to pay dividends this year.
All right, you keep saying sky's the limit. You know what I'm going to do to you next.
What are you going to do to me?
We went through the free agency. Now we made it through the drafts. What's your new prediction for what the Bears are going to have for a record this year?
You really going to do this to me?
I'm going to do this to you.
I know that this is going to be crazy. It's a 17-game season.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going 11-6.
Okay.
I'm going 11-6, and I think that they're going to make it into the playoffs. I think it's difficult, but I think that they're gonna get a high wild card spot. I don't think they're winning the division.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is Detroit. I think is a juggernaut. I really do. Now, do I think there might be a little bit of an issue when it comes to the offense because Ben Johnson's no longer there? Potentially.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, I think to count Detroit out, I think would be foolish. I really do. And I think going then over to Minnesota, we don't know what Minnesota is going to be this year because they caught lightning in a bottle with Sam Darnold when he had a resurgent year last year. But we don't know what J.J. McCarthy is. He missed all of last season. He tore his knee in training camp, and it's something where we don't know what he's going to be. But now they've dedicated all their resources to making him the starter. We don't know what that looks like. In Green Bay, I'm sorry, I don't believe in Green Bay. They overpaid Jordan Love, and I don't feel like they're going to be that much of a threat. But I think that I thought that last year, and they snuck into the playoffs. So I think that Detroit is probably going to win the division, but I think the Bears could very easily get a wild card spot.
Okay, and so you're not thinking that they'll win, the championship this year, but you think maybe next year once they get all their pieces together?
Super Bowl in 3 years.
3 years. Okay, you heard it here first, folks.
Super Bowl in 3 years. I think that the building blocks are there.
Yeah,
I really
you gotta build and
really
mesh.
do. Yes, I think you need time to mesh, and I don't think that this is that much of a hot take. I see it very much being like last year's Washington Commanders, where they surprised the league. And yes, I do understand last year you had Jaden Daniels as the rookie quarterback, and this would be Caleb's second year, but I could see them catching the league by surprise. Ben Johnson comes in, takes over immediately. They start doing really interesting, innovative stuff on offense. You've got Dennis Allen on the defensive side of the ball, who has a proven track record of being a top 5 defensive coordinator. I can see a very solid team, and I see you making a really deep run. You get that experience this year, and then come back next year and just make the biggest push possible for that Super Bowl.
Yeah.
All right, now that I've got myself all excited here, gotta go take a cold shower.
Oh no.
All right, any final thoughts before we wrap for the day?
I think I'm feeling like the pup down here. We are currently snoring really hard, twitching, and I think our tongue is sticking out a little bit. So I want to join her on that.
I can 100% confirm that tongue is out and it is flicking right now. It is absolutely
Let's
nuts
clarify
bananas.
the dog's, not yours.
Why can't it be both? We were just talking about Super Bowl in 3.
Okay.
All right. Well, on that note, definitely hit us up on our social media, TwoPupConversion. Find us on Facebook, on X, on Instagram. We're posting this up on YouTube. Reach out to TwoPupConversion@gmail.com in order to give us some show ideas. We always check that to see if there's any suggestions from our loyal listeners. So, from all of us here at TwoPupConversion, thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.